People think turning 70 is when your life actually ends. That is the story society tells us, isn't it? That suddenly you become fragile, irrelevant, and just another problem that needs to be managed by the younger generation. They think I was afraid to die all alone in my big, empty house. But that was not it at all. I was terrified of what they would do to me while I was still living and breathing. There is a massive difference between the two. Welcome back to the Auntie May channel, my wonderful friends. Today, we are diving into a deeply personal story about aging, preserving your dignity, and finding family in the most unexpected places. If you have ever felt invisible, or if you are worried about yourself or your parents getting older, this video is exactly for you. Before we get deep into this journey, please take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells YouTube that you appreciate these real, honest stories, and it helps our little community grow. Now, get comfortable. Maybe pour a warm cup of tea, and let me tell you my story. My name is Cecily Marrow. I am 91 years old. Over the span of nearly a century, I have worn many hats. I have been a devoted daughter, a loving wife to my late husband Harold, a mother to 2 beautiful children, a widow who had to learn how to sleep on the left side of a cold bed, and for the last 6 years, a woman who lives completely alone. My house is too big for me now. It has 4 bedrooms that gather dust, wooden floors that creak in the middle of the night, and a silence that can sometimes feel absolutely deafening. But it is entirely, stubbornly mine. Every scratch on the kitchen counter tells a story of a family dinner. Every faded patch of wallpaper reminds me of the bright sunlight that used to pour in while Harold read his morning newspaper. Leaving it felt like leaving my own skin. If you are watching this right now because you are secretly terrified of getting old, or because someone you love dearly is currently aging and you do not know what to do, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Because the truth is, nobody warns you about the real, profound changes. The physical things are obvious. Nobody needs to tell you that your body starts narrating your life out loud. Your knees start predicting the weather better than the meteorologist on the evening news. Your hands, which once firmly held slippery, screaming newborns and carried heavy loads of laundry up 3 flights of stairs, begin to shake just trying to pour a simple cup of coffee. But those physical betrayals are not the hardest part of getting old. The absolute hardest part is that you slowly become invisible to the rest of the world. You walk into a room and realize you are no longer viewed as a vibrant person with unique ideas, strong opinions, and burning desires. You are suddenly just a category. You are simply labeled as elderly. People start speaking to you louder, as if your hearing loss means you have also lost your intelligence. They start making decisions for you out of love, but it feels incredibly suffocating. Let me tell you about the specific year my daughter Margaret officially decided that I needed help. It was a cold, grey Tuesday in November. In my mind, I was managing perfectly fine. I cooked all my own meals, even if they were simpler now. I paid my bills on time using my checkbook, and I walked down to the end of my block every single morning to keep my heart strong. But Margaret had been watching me closely for months. She was watching me the way you watch a fragile, antique glass figure that you fully expect to break at any given second. She drove up to my house on a Saturday afternoon with my son-in-law, David. They walked through the front door, and the energy in the house instantly shifted. David sat quietly at my worn kitchen table, wrapping his hands around a hot mug of coffee, and he just let Margaret do all the heavy talking. She pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, cleared her throat, and looked at me with eyes full of absolute panic. "Mom," she said, leaning forward and placing her hand over mine. "We have been thinking a lot lately, and we feel that maybe it is time to sit down and talk about your options." Options. I have always deeply distrusted that word. When people use the word options in that specific tone of voice, it never actually means freedom. It never means you get to choose what brings you joy. It usually means that they have already decided something behind your back, and they are simply going to present it to you in a neatly wrapped package to make it seem like you still have a choice in the matter. But as I looked across the table at her face, I did not see malice. I saw genuine, raw fear. She was frightened for me, and she was frightened of losing me. Because I loved her, and because I owed my children the courtesy of honesty, I decided to listen. She laid out 3 distinct options from her little notebook. Option number 1 was to pack up my life and come live with her and David in their home. Option number 2 was to hire a professional caregiver to come to my house for the day-to-day tasks. Option number 3, and she said this one very gently, lowering her voice, was that we could go look at some communities. Communities. That is the polite modern word for a nursing home. I agreed to try option number 1 first. I packed 2 suitcases with my most comfortable clothes, my favorite books, and the framed photograph of Harold that sits on my nightstand. I locked the door to my beautiful, stubborn house and went to stay at Margaret's place. Margaret's house is incredibly warm, bright, and meticulously well kept. My great-grandchildren are wonderfully loud and full of joyful energy. Little Oscar, who was only 4 at the time, used to climb right up into my lap without even asking for permission. I had not felt the warm, alive, squirming weight of a child in my lap in so many years, and it brought tears to my eyes the first time he did it. But the harsh reality about living in your own daughter's house when you are 90 years old is that you become, very quickly and undeniably, a guest in someone else's life. They had a very tightly scheduled routine to keep their busy lives running smoothly. Dinner was strictly at 6 o'clock in the evening because of the children's bedtimes. So I sat at the table at 6 o'clock, chewed my food, and smiled politely, even though Harold and I had always been late eaters. We used to eat at 8 or 9, talking for hours under the dim kitchen light. Now I slept in a beautiful guest room that smelled strongly of fresh lavender. Lavender is a lovely scent, but it was not the smell of my house. It was not the smell of old wood, old books, and it certainly was not Harold's familiar scent. I felt like a stranger sleeping in a beautiful hotel. The breaking point came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was walking down the hallway and I overheard David's voice through the thin, dry wall of the kitchen. He did not know I was awake yet. I heard a fragment of a frustrated sentence about the morning bathroom schedule and how my slow pace was making everyone late for church. Then I heard Margaret's lower, soothing voice trying to calm him down, followed by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I stood frozen in that hallway, staring at the family photos on the wall, and the reality hit me like a physical blow. I had become the thing they were managing around. I was no longer the matriarch of the family. I had officially become a schedule problem, a burden. I went back to the lavender-smelling room and I cried that night. I did not cry from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally admitting the truth to myself. This was not what walking. The next morning, over a bowl of oatmeal, I told Margaret that I wanted to go back to my own house and try the second option. The professional caregiver arrived on a cold morning in January. Her name was Brenda. She was a brisk, highly efficient woman of about 55 years old. She wore practical shoes and moved around my house like a mild tornado. She meant well. She really did. But she cleaned my kitchen so thoroughly and reorganized my cabinets so efficiently that I could not find a single spoon or coffee filter for 3 whole days. She threw away my expired canned goods without asking. She made me perfectly nutritionally appropriate lunches that were completely devoid of salt, butter, or any actual flavor. And the hardest part was that she called me Mrs. Marrow. After 40 years of being Cecily to my friends, being Mom to my children, and being Grandma Cece to the little ones, I was suddenly reduced to a formal, clinical Mrs. Marrow. You might listen to this and think I sound ungrateful for the help, but you have to understand that your kitchen is never just a room where you prepare food. It is the heart of your history. My kitchen is the room where I stood for 22 years making peanut butter sandwiches for my children's school lunches. It is the exact spot where Harold and I used to dance slowly to the radio late at night when the kids were finally asleep. Having Brenda buzzing around in there, taking over my space, felt exactly like watching someone casually walk right down the middle aisle of a church while a sacred service is still going on. It was polite, it was professional, but it felt deeply wrong. Furthermore, the agency cost significantly more than my modest monthly pension could realistically handle, and I absolutely refused to drain my savings and become a financial burden on my daughter. I wanted to leave them something when I passed. So, after 3 weeks, I made the call and cancelled the agency. Margaret cried on the phone when I told her Brenda was gone. She begged me, with panic rising in her voice again, to please just look at the third option. So, we went to look at the community. We visited a very bright, very clean place, painted in cheerful pastel colours. The moment we walked through the glass doors, a young staff member with a perfectly bright smile called me sweetheart. She called me sweetheart within 5 minutes of meeting me, speaking to me in that high-pitched voice people reserve for toddlers and puppies. They gave us the grand tour. They showed me a sterile single room with a large white board mounted securely on the wall. Written on that board in bright blue marker was the unchangeable daily schedule. 9 in the morning was chair stretches. 10 o'clock was supervised arts and crafts. 12 noon was a communal lunch in the dining hall. 2 in the afternoon was a classic film in the media room. 4 o'clock was designated social hour. I stood in the center of that little room, staring at that bright blue marker on the whiteboard, and I thought about my life. I have survived a massive economic depression that left us scraping for pennies. I survived a devastating world war that took boys I knew from my neighborhood and never brought them back. I have lived through 4 presidents that I genuinely liked and 6 that I absolutely could not stand. I have been waking up and making my own conscious decisions every single day of my life for 9 long decades. And now, a cheerful young woman holding a plastic clipboard was going to dictate my life. She was going to tell me that exactly at 2 o'clock I will be sitting in a chair watching a film, whether I felt like it or not. I turned to Margaret, held her hand, and said, "Not yet." I was simply not ready to hand over the very last essential, beautiful thing I had left in this world. The fundamental right to decide exactly what I want to do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So there I was, back at square one. I had no daughter's house to live in, no expensive agency caregiver organizing my cabinets, and absolutely no cheerful clipboard telling me when to socialize. It was just me, the echoing silence of my big house, my ugly but incredibly comfortable green armchair, and an unsolved problem looming over my head. What happened next was not part of some grand master plan. It was not a strategy I read in a book. I was just feeling exceptionally tired and profoundly lonely one afternoon, and I decided to force myself to go outside to check the mail, just to feel the sun on my face. Right there, standing at the mailbox next to mine, was the new tenant who had just moved into the rental property next door. She was a young woman, and she looked like she was drowning. She was desperately wrestling with a stubborn folding stroller, a large paper bag of groceries that was tearing at the handles, and an 18-month-old little boy who had made the firm decision to sit down flat on the concrete pavement and absolutely refuse to move another inch. She had that distinct look on her face. It is the look of someone who has been holding the entire world together by a single fraying thread all day long, and who just needs one more pair of hands to keep everything from crashing down. I knew that exact look in my bones. I had worn that face when my own children were small and Harold was working night shifts. I slowly walked over to her. "Can I hold something for you?" I asked softly. She looked up at me, brushed a strand of sweaty hair out of her eyes, and let out a breathless sigh. "Yes, please," she said. I reached out and took the heavy paper bag of groceries, cradling it in my arms. With her hands finally free, she scooped up the screaming toddler, wrestled the stroller open, got the groceries settled into the basket, and let out a genuinely surprised, exhausted laugh. We stood there on the sidewalk and introduced ourselves. Her name was Leela. She was 29 years old. She was a newly single mother, navigating life with her toddler Marcus and a highly inquisitive 7-year-old girl named Priya. She told me she had recently moved across the entire city to start over, had unfortunately lost her new job just 4 months later, and there was absolutely no husband or partner in the picture to help her carry the load. She was entirely alone in a brand new neighborhood. She had no friends nearby. She had absolutely no one to call at 7 o'clock in the morning when her baby woke up with a burning fever, and she had to decide between going to work and taking care of her child. I listened to her talk, and I instantly knew the exact shape of that particular loneliness. I recognized the exhaustion and the fear in her, the way you recognize a native language you once spoke beautifully many years ago. We were generations apart, but we were standing on the exact same ground. Our relationship started very small and very organically. A few days later, she tentatively knocked on my front door early in the morning. She asked if Marcus could possibly stay with me in the living room for just one single hour while she ran down the street to drop Priya off at her elementary school. I smiled and told her, "Of course he can." Little Marcus came inside, and he used to walk straight over to my glass display cabinet. He would press his chubby little face flat against the cold glass, breathing heavily on it to create a fog, just so he could look at his own blurry reflection and giggle. I found it absolutely unbearably lovable. I did not care about the smudges on the glass. I cared that there was life inside my house again. Soon Priya started coming over in the afternoons. She would sit right at my old wooden kitchen table, spreading out her math homework and colored pencils, while I stood at the counter preparing my late evening dinner. Priya had a mind that never stopped working. She asked me the most amazing, unfiltered questions. She asked me if people used to only have black and white vision before color television was invented. She asked me if I was afraid of dying. I looked at her big, curious eyes and told her the honest truth. I said, "A little bit, sweetheart, but mostly I am just very, very tired by 9 o'clock at night." She thought that was the funniest thing she had ever heard, and she laughed so hard she nearly tumbled right off the kitchen chair. Hearing that sound filling my kitchen, I realized I had not made a child laugh with such pure abandon in so many years. It was like music. Layla naturally started coming over just to check on me. She did not come over with a clipboard or a strict schedule. She did not bring the heavy, suffocating weight of worry that Margaret brought. She just knocked on the door to say hello. Sometimes she brought over extra portions of dinner she had cooked. She introduced me to a spicy tomato and egg dish called shakshuka, which I have to admit I still have very mixed feelings about, but I ate it because she made it with love. She would sit in my kitchen, drink tea with me, and we just talked like two human beings. She let her guard down and told me her deepest fears, that she felt she was failing as a mother, that she was not providing enough for her children, that the small amount of money she had saved would not last through the winter. Listening to Layla, I realized something incredibly profound about the human experience. Fear arranges itself in the exact same way in a woman's chest in 1967 as it does in the modern world of today. The anxiety of not being enough, the terror of not being able to protect your children, the crushing weight of financial stress. Fear never updates its methods. It transcends time. Because she was so open with me, I found myself telling her things I had not spoken out loud to anyone in decades. I told her about the dark, heavy year right after my Harold died. I told her how I deliberately left his unwashed coffee cup sitting on the kitchen counter for 6 straight months because washing it and putting it away felt like I was officially erasing him from the house. Layla did not try to offer me unsolicited advice. She did not try to manage my grief or tell me it was time to move on. She simply sat there, held my shaking hand, and listened. By the time spring finally arrived, the snow melting away to reveal green grass, our lives were deeply intertwined. I was watching Marcus 2 full mornings every single week so that Layla could go out and confidently attend job interviews. Priya stopped by my house every single day after school to show me her drawings and tell me about the drama on the playground. In return, Layla helped me carry all of my heavy grocery bags into the house. She climbed on a step stool and changed the burnt-out light bulbs in the ceiling fixtures that I could no longer reach safely. I tried to help her garden, though I accidentally overwatered and killed her basil plants 3 separate times before I finally managed to grow her a healthy new one. We were not a traditional family connected by blood, but we had become something so much older and perhaps even stronger than that. We had become neighbors in the truest, most original meaning of the word. We were people living side by side who genuinely needed each other, who consistently showed up for one another without being asked, and who learned how to ask for help without turning it into a massive, shameful production. My mother's generation, the women who lived through the hardest times of the last century, would have recognized this arrangement immediately. They survived by leaning over the fence and sharing the load. When my daughter Margaret came to visit me that following April, she walked into my house and stopped dead in her tracks. She found Leela and me sitting at the kitchen table, loudly debating a recipe. Priya quietly reading a chapter book in the corner of the living room, and little Marcus sitting on the floor, happily chewing on one of my wooden cooking spoons. The house was loud, messy, and wonderfully alive. Before Margaret left to go back to her perfect, scheduled life, she paused at the front door. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes welling up with tears, and she said, "Mom, you seem exactly like yourself again." And she was absolutely right. I was myself again. In the simple daily business of being useful to someone else, of being genuinely needed, of being completely honest with another human being without fear of judgment, I had slowly found my way back to myself. So please listen to me today. I want you to hear this loud and clear. Nobody is coming to miraculously save you. I do not say that with an ounce of cruelty. I say it with the utmost love and respect. You can sit in your chair and wait forever for someone to come along and perfectly manage your life. Or you can choose to pick up the tools yourself and start building something meaningful right where you are. I am 91 years old. I live alone in a house that is too big for me. But what actually determines whether you live a good life is whether you make the conscious decision every single day to keep reaching out across the terrifying space between yourself and another person. I could not give my daughter Margaret a mother who magically did not need anything anymore. I could not give that cheerful retirement community a docile resident who did not mind happily handing over her own authority and independence. But what I could do was hold a torn paper bag for a tired, overwhelmed young woman on the sidewalk. I could sit across a sticky kitchen table, drink tea, tell the ugly truth about life, and discover the beautiful secret that two heavy struggles, when faced together, are somehow so much lighter than one. Do not pack your bags and go somewhere just to be taken care of before you have tried something else first, before you have taken a deep breath and knocked on a neighbor's door. I honestly do not know how long this beautiful arrangement with Layla and the kids will last. Our human bodies have their own unpredictable schedules, and I know my time is not infinite. But here is exactly what I know right now, in this exact moment, sitting in this faded green armchair that completely clashes with everything else in the room. I am not being managed by anyone. I am not a schedule problem to be solved. I am Cecily. I stood in my own kitchen and made my own lunch today. And this morning, a bright-eyed 3-year-old boy ran into my living room and proudly announced to his mother that I am his best friend in the whole world. That is enough. After 91 years of searching for meaning, I have finally, truly understood that it is exactly enough. Thank you so much for spending your time with me on the Auntie May channel today. Stories like Cecily's remind us of the power of human connection, no matter our age or circumstances. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this story. Please drop down into the comments section right now and tell me, have you ever found family in an unexpected place? Or have you ever helped a neighbor in a way that changed both of your lives? Let us share our experiences and build each other up. Your stories inspire me every single day. And if Cecily's journey touched your heart, or if it made you think of a parent, a grandparent, or a friend who needs a little encouragement, please hit that share button and send this video their way. It might just be the exact message they need to hear today. Don't forget to keep reaching out to one another. Take good care of your beautiful hearts, and I will see you all in the very next video.